Well, lots going on as usual. Today's Tuesday, April 1st, April Fool's Day, and we're going to talk about why it's April Fool's Day today, 2025. And I don't do April Fools. I like to make sure or try to make sure that my news is as accurate as possible. So I'm not going to be playing any tricks on you or telling you something's real when it's not real. I don't like that. But we're going to talk about the origins of April Fools. It goes back to the Gregorian calendar. And if we had 13 months of 28 days, there's one day left over. And I think that's interesting. And that change goes back to the change in the Gregorian calendar. And it used to be that you celebrated New Year's Day on April 1st. And people who continued to celebrate New Year's Day on April 1st were called April Fools. So happy April Fool's Day, everyone. Happy New Year. Mark Carney puts his political life on the line to back Chiang. And Chiang resigns. Pretty awesome. Pretty funny. Yesterday, Carney said, I will stand behind him. Everything. He has my full confidence, my full support, the whole deal. And now the Rcmp are looking into it, which, I mean, I'm not holding my breath on the Rcmp finding anything because they just seem completely blind. Have we gotten official reports on any of the scandals since Brenda Lucki left? I mean, again, I don't have any kind of confidence in any of our institutions at this point, unfortunately. But after Carney decided to put his political life on the line, Chiang resigns on him. Hilarious. The Liberals again promise the same housing promise they made with Justin Trudeau in 2015 and again in 2021 and again last year with all of their tours about how much they're going to build houses and all the money that's going into accelerators and stuff. But they haven't built any houses. They haven't actually accomplished anything. So more money and it's doomed to fail. And people are already doing the math on this saying this sounds an awful lot like the lies that we've been fed for the last 2 years about housing that Justin Trudeau was chased out of office for. So that's interesting. We'll look at that. PPC calls on a revival of the Canadian Armed Forces, so wanting to rebuild the Canadian Armed Forces. That's interesting. And Trump wants to run for a third term. And somebody says, what happens, sir, if the Democrats run Barack Obama? And Trump, he couldn't contain the excitement in his voice. He said, oh, that sounds good. I'd love that. He's like, yes, let's do that. Can we make that happen? Let's go do that. Yes, I'd love that. Set it up. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, I was going to read a little bit more on the origins of the April 1st Happy New Year thing, but I pretty much covered it. The King of France, Charles IX, instituted the switch in 1564. Foremost was beginning the new year on January 1st instead of April 1st. The problem was that the 16th century communications were not what they are today. Of course, given the state of the current Twittering world, that may have been a good thing. He goes on, those who refused to honor January 1st as the beginning of the new year and continue to use April 1st was a demarcation. That demarcation became known as April Fools for their austerity and resistance to change. Happy New Year. As the lore goes, April 1st was dubbed April Fool's Day for those who clung to their old ways, right? And I don't know. It's one of those things that I usually skip over. Anyway, I like to report real news, like, China's running the Liberal Party and stuff, all that kind of stuff. And it's wild that the mainstream media doesn't report that because they're paid off by the government. So anyway, that's why. Here's Ezra, and he goes to Mark Carney's event to interview supporters and say, hey, when one candidate calls for citizens to kidnap another candidate, you support that? Do you really? And Adam Van K says, yes, I didn't say it. So thanks, Ezra. See you later. He's very uncomfortable. You can see that. It's pretty interesting. And while Ezra's doing the on-the-ground reporting here we go.
Are you worried about the Chinese connection with Paul Chiang? It sort of shines a spotlight on Mark Carney's connections with China and the fact we still don't know who the 11 MPs were. How do you feel about standing with Paul Chiang after his outlandish comments?
I feel very confident in the future of the Liberal Party under the leadership of Mark Carney.
But what about the Chinese connection, though?
Pivot.
If you'd allow me to finish, Ezra, I'm very, very confident in the confidence that Canada has put in Mark Carney, and I'm very, very confident that Paul Chiang has been accountable for his comments.
Canada hasn't put any confidence into Mark Carney. Canada hasn't said a damn thing about Mark Carney, other than concerning what's wrong with his teeth and things like that.
How has he been accountable?
With his words and with his comments. Anyways,
that's enough for you? Just saying sorry and he can still stay? He called for a man to be kidnapped.
Look, it wasn't something that I said, Ezra, and I think the Prime Minister said it best. It's a moment that we can all learn from. Thanks for your question.
But what's the lesson that we've learned?
Thanks, Ezra.
What utter nonsense. Absolutely shallow, right? Ridiculous. Here's Mark Carney. Rupa says Carney brazenly defends candidate who said someone should turn over his conservative opponent to Chinese authorities so they can collect a bounty for his arrest. Trump's concerns that the Chinese Communist Party have infiltrated Canadian politics seem to be playing out in real time. So this is 5 minutes of Mark Carney talking about this. This is kind of in the middle, and there's a little 1 minute and 30-second clip. My clip here covers that too, but this just kind of gives an expanded look at what's going on with this. So we're going to watch this one. Here we go.
A political candidate.
Look, this is a person of integrity who's served this community, his community, as a senior police officer for, as I said, more than a quarter century. He's made a terrible lapse in judgment. He's made an apology for that. It's also an individual who has family in Hong Kong. He's under no illusions about the situation there, the situation in broader China.
If he was a police officer, he should have known better not to talk about how much, not to encourage people to kidnap people. If he's got family in Hong Kong and understands how serious China is about all of this stuff, he should doubly have known that from his experience as a police officer and firsthand experience with family in China and Hong Kong, et cetera, et cetera. And so this does not help his case at all. This underlines why what was said was so egregious, jaw-dropping, and does not justify at all Carney's position of standing behind Chiang.
He's made those apologies. He's made them directly to the individual.
And an apology? That's not enough. Not even close to enough at all, period. Right? Nope.
Individual concerned. He's made them directly to me. He has my confidence. Thank you.
It's not just opposition parties calling for Mr. Chiang's resignation. It's also at least 13 civil society groups. What message are you sending to Canadians who are worried about pressure from China when you allow him to stay on? And how can you credibly criticize Pierre Poilievre for his lack of security clearance when Mr. Chiang is considered a worthy candidate?
Well, I am deeply offended by those comments. As I said, they're a terrible lapse of judgment.
Deeply offended by those comments, and moving on. Did he sound deeply offended at all? Like, he did not sound deeply offended whatsoever. Like, if you're deeply offended, you might be able to go up and down somebody and put your position into an understandable bite-sized kind of 1-2 punch for them, right? Landman, the lawyer, goes into the room and then tears apart the other legal team. That's the kind of response when you're deeply offended by something. They imply in Landman that the pretty, like, attractive young female lawyer is just pretty and young, and there's no depth to her, and she absolutely obliterates them. That's what you do when you're deeply offended. You destroy your opponents, right? And like Mark Carney is deeply offended. Next question. It doesn't make me feel like I believe a word that's coming out of his mouth. Deeply offended by those comments. Carry on. Like, ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I view this as a teachable moment. It underscores the respect.
We've all learned something. Yes, what we've learned is that the Liberal Party of Canada is actually the Chinese Communist Liberal Party. That's all we've learned, because they sure as shit aren't working for Canada.
Respect with which we treat human rights.
Teachable moment, learnable moment.
The differences between Canadian society and other countries. This, after all, though, I will go back to the character of the individual who made a lapse judgment. This is someone who has served our community, has been on the front line of.
If he made a judgment like, hey guys, did you know that the bounty for my political opponent is $1 million Hong Kong dollars, which is about 170,000 Canadian dollars, and you should collect that if you bring him to the Chinese Beijing embassy. What? That is not an appropriate thing to say for anybody, and a police officer should know that, or a former police officer should know that. Ryan says, Carney believes Chiang apologized and was a veteran policeman. He should be able to continue his candidacy. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. Sam Cooper says, Carney says Chiang has his confidence after Joe Tay shares he contacted the Rcmp for protection, demands Carney fire MP over bounty remark. So the victim in all this, the Conservative candidate, has gone to the Rcmp for protection, which is awful, right? Like, that's a terrible thing to have to do. But also, I fear that's like going to the Secret Service. Like, they're just as likely to shoot you in the back. It didn't seem, remember when President Trump, the assassination attempt on President Trump, and the Secret Service allowed him to stand back up and fist pump and stuff. Like, he could have been shot in the head. There could have been other shooters. There could have been all sorts of things. And it seems like they put him at risk. And also, there's a whole bunch of other concerning situations with inside jobs and things. Isn't the Kennedy assassination files, aren't they interesting? And so all of that in context, it seems like the RCMP are the wrong people to go to. But that's what's happening. And so still, Mark Carney says, no, I'm standing by this candidate. Tracy says, another learning moment for us all. It's more clear than ever the liberals are compromised, and she's calling them the Chinese communist liberals too, in not so many words. Michael Chiang says Paul Chiang has uttered one of the most undemocratic things ever said in an election, that his political opponent be handed over to a hostile regime for a bounty. Mark Carney's decision to stand behind Chiang will negatively impact our democracy for years to come. Why will it negatively impact our democracy for years to come? Will he not be swiftly chastised by the voters? Or are we all admitting that our elections are rigged and he's going to be swept in with, 66% of the vote? 70% of the vote. Michael Chong continues. He says, Globe and Mail editorial, Mr. Chiang should resign, and if he refuses, Mr. Carney should show leadership and respect the plight of Hong Kong by dumping him as a candidate. And Pierre says, at this point, the only possible interpretation is that Carney is more compromised than Chiang himself. I think so. I absolutely think so. James says, in government, you have to make some really tough choices. So when you botch a very simple, ethically clear, and self-evident choice, it raises real doubts about your judgment and toughness. Do the right and obvious thing, Mark Carney. And this is in response to the Globe and Mail saying Carney stands by his communist liberal candidate who says conservative rivals should be turned in for a Chinese bounty, right? Crazy town. Jody Wilson-Raybould, former Attorney General, if only Scott Bryson hadn't resigned, right? Globe Politics, she's responding to Globe Politics that says Carney stands beside by the candidate who made deeply offensive comments. And Jody Wilson-Raybould says, eek, the new guy is starting to look much like the old guy. Yeah, they were identical from the beginning because Mark Carney advised Justin Trudeau. Sam Cooper says, I want to be clear, no apology is efficient, the opponent says, Tay says. Threats like these are tradecraft of the Chinese Communist Party to interfere in Canada, and they are not just aimed at me. They are intended to send a chilling signal to the entire community in order to force compliance to Beijing's political goals. So yeah, very, very interesting. Joe Tay says he contacted the RCMP for protection, and this is their modus operandi. This is what they do. Kevin says, why did Carney pass on such an easy political win, replace the candidate, look tough on foreign interference, score political points? It's a solid liberal riding. Another candidate would have won easily. His lack of action raises serious suspicion. Yeah, what's going on there? Here's Pierre Poilievre responding to this whole thing. And halfway through, there's two questions here. Both are probably worth listening to. We'll just listen. It's fine. 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes. Here we go.
Mark Carney is keeping Paul Chiang as a candidate, called this incident a teachable moment. What is your reaction? Have you spoken to Joe Tay, and how's he feeling?
Well, it is a teachable moment. It teaches us that Mark Carney will never stand up for Canada. He is keeping on a Liberal candidate who said that people should turn over the Conservative candidate to a bounty by the Chinese government, which wants to kill him. The Chinese government wants to literally kill Joe Tay because he's a political dissident. And this candidate said that that should happen. Mark Carney keeps that candidate on his roster to be in Parliament. It shows that Carney is more interested in pleasing Beijing because they lent him $250 million for his company. He is compromised. I have never in my life seen a Prime Minister unwilling to protect a Canadian citizen against a foreign government that wants to take his life through a bounty. If Mark Carney won't stand up for a Canadian against this foreign hostile regime now, how could we ever expect him to stand up for Canada after the election? I have spoken to Joe Tay. Yesterday I spoke to him. He's very, very rattled. This is not, let's be clear, this is not about an inappropriate or off-color joke. These comments by this Liberal candidate may well rise to the level of criminal because they called for someone to be turned over to a hostile foreign government on a bounty a government that wants to kill this Canadian citizen. And Mr. Jote is extremely afraid. He's afraid for his life. And I think he is probably rattled by the fact that the Prime Minister of Canada is siding with a Liberal MP who has made these horrific and dangerous comments against a Canadian citizen, against the life of a fellow Canadian citizen.
There you go. So comprehensive response from Poilievre. He kind of repeated himself. Here's Kevin Vuong, another MP independent. He says the Liberal Party keeps emphasizing their bounty hunter is a 28-year police veteran. Don't they realize it only emphasizes he should have known better than to encourage people to kidnap an opponent? As per Warren Kinsella, counseling others to commit a crime is also a crime, right? And so that's interesting. And it seems like nobody is really going to do much about this. Here's CBC talking about this, and an oil exec says, after watching Liberals downplay Chiang's words as a joke, Chuck Kwan fires back at the CBC. This is the tip of the iceberg on foreign interference. The Hogue Report whitewashed the truth. The government is dragging its feet. He's toxic and bad news. Yeah, yep. And so he's stepped down. And so, again, this was in the early hours of April 1st. I don't think this is an April Fool's joke. I think it's legit. Here is the statement from Paul Chiang 9 hours ago. And so he says, for the past 3.5 years, it's been the greatest honor of my life to serve the people of Markham Unionville as their member of parliament. Every day I served with integrity and worked to deliver results for the people of my community. I'm proud of what we have achieved together. I remain deeply grateful for the trust placed in me. This is a uniquely important election with so much at stake for Canadians. As the Prime Minister and Team Canada work to stand up to President Trump and protect our economy, I do not want there to be distractions in this critical moment. That's why I'm standing aside as our 2025 candidate in our community of Markham Unionville. I want to thank my family for their support and our community for standing with me as we have worked to build a better future. For over 3 decades, I've served my community with my fullest commitment to keeping people safe and protecting our country's values, and I always will. And if you happen to grab that guy and take him to the Beijing embassy, make sure you split the bounty with me, he says. No, not really. But honestly, no mention of China, no mention of I misspoke, I did something wrong, I made a mistake, I've caused a problem. And I mean, saying you're going to step down because you don't want to cause a distraction, fine. But, my allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party has become an issue where it wasn't before. There's all sorts of things that he could have said, but he didn't say. So Andrew Scheer says, why won't Carney fire his candidate who called for a Canadian citizen to be handed over to the Chinese communist regime for a bounty? Maybe because he has a conflict of interest. Listen to Carney's own words. Here's Mark Carney talking about China. He loves China. Loves China. Love China.
The momentum behind this agenda is now tremendous, and it'll be important that China is center stage to shape this new global, sustainable financial system.
If he could motorboat China, maybe he's got his own Fang Fang. Who was the one that Adam Solwell was banging? Fang Fang. Michael Cooper says, look what we dug up. So this is another clip of Mark Carney talking about how awesome China is.
One of the many strengths of China is their perspective, the medium long-term perspective. This is an ambitious G20. It's an ambitious Chinese leadership. One of the many strengths
there you go.
of
So
China is
Mark Carney, lots of strengths of China, ambitious, blah, 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 blah. So he loves China, and maybe he should move there if he loves them so much. Norman says, Diane is responding to Mark Norman. Mark Norman says, CBC asked Carney's campaign for a comment and has not yet received a response. Earlier in the day, Carney defended Chiang as a person of integrity who is a longtime former police officer with more than a quarter century of service to his community. And Diane says, did Chiang just throw Mark Carney under the bus with his resignation? How will Carney answer the questions about Chiang's resignation after he defended him so vehemently? This is going to be good, she says. Another teachable moment. Carney isn't ready. He might make an okay finance advisor, but Prime Minister, he's not good enough for Canada. He's a European, right? Like Canadian. What's that, he says. Globe Politics says Liberal candidate Chiang resigns over Chinese bounty comments, so everybody's reporting it. Robin says it's a stain on Mr. Carney's personal character that he cannot recognize that these comments are disqualifying and an indictment of his willingness to confront foreign interference, that he will not act in his relatively small, isolated case. And so, weird thing to turn a blind eye to, right? Oh yeah, he's a police officer who just happened to counsel other people to commit a crime and go and kidnap somebody and take them to an embassy for a bounty. Perfect. Makes perfect sense. What? Mario, who's a content creator, I guess, on TikTok, he says apparently making videos about Paul Chiang on TikTok gets your video taken down for hate speech. Nothing to see here. And Mark Nixon, he's the other guy. These guys do face to camera videos and stuff. I've used their stuff before, both of them. Mark Nixon says, I posted a video saying Jagmeet Singh and the NDP party is broke and TikTok gave me a strike for hate speech. What the heck is going on? I disputed and won, but you can't say anything. So there's only 21 comments under this. I made a comment and I've only got 2 views on it. Like, there's censorship going on, which is crazy. But like, even just random comments to other content creators, right? Unbelievable. Shelley says, is responding to Sam Cooper. Sam Cooper says the RCMP confirms it's looking into alleged foreign threat following Liberal candidate Paul Chiang's comments. And Shelley says, like they looked into all the corruption that Trudeau did? Yeah, okay. RCMP are paid and they don't work for Canadians. They work for the regime. I have to agree with that. And here is Michael Chong again. Breaking: Hong Kong Watch issues a letter to the RCMP commissioner to investigate Paul Chiang. And in the letter, it says Mr. Chiang's conduct would appear to fit within the parameters of counseling to commit the indictable offense of kidnapping per section 464 of the Criminal Code. So there's lots of really big problems with this. It seems like Mark Carney doesn't have very good judgment. It seems like Mark Carney is, has destroyed whatever was left of the Liberal Party of Canada after Trudeau. Mark Carney killed it in 9 days. So there you go. We'll see how these Liberals do, but I can't imagine them doing very well, right? So they're saying 93 seats or something like that, 92 seats. I would be shocked. But, I was wrong about China yesterday. Mark Carney didn't step down, although the firestorm his not stepping down has created is interesting to watch. He might just step down after all this. No, they're going to go with Carney, and that'll be the end of it. And they're just going to try and fashion a narrative where everybody realizes that Carney's great and we love him and his yellow teeth. Honestly. They're trying to find their way to do that now. Here's the Liberals' plan. So this is what they're running on, and they're running on the same lies that the Trudeau government was rolling out to try and maintain power, and it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. So Free Alberta says Section 32 of the Parliament of Canada Act made Mark Carney ineligible to become the Liberal leader or a member of Parliament. According to the Parliament of Canada Act, Section 32, Mark Carney is ineligible to be the leader and is ineligible to be a member of the House of Commons. The Trudeau government paid Mark Carney a salary, fee, wages, allowance, annulment of profit or profit of any kind while he was the Liberal government's chief economic advisor. And here's the Parliament of Canada Act. So, and the Section 32 does indeed say all of that. I don't know if it's accurate. There's a whole bunch of other language about exceptions here, and so I don't know because it talks about appointments and people being appointed and all sorts of other stuff. So I don't know if it actually applies to Carney, but it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to consider anyway. Gov.exe says Mark Carney announces $35 billion in spending to create a new government body to develop and finance home building and support environmentally friendly modular home construction. The Liberal plan is to spend billions to build communist housing. Yay, great. That's really super good, right? Here is John, and he says that's 1,369.8 homes per day. That's 57 homes completed per hour. In Canada, it typically takes a home builder between 6 to 10 months in total to build a new home. Even Liberal Party voters can't be this stupid. Well, they're all paper people. They don't actually exist, right? It's all the fraud that votes for Liberal. Shane says, I'm not sure what to make of this announcement. It's the housing announcement. Other than to question who's funding it, is it the taxpayer? It seems like a form of social engineering in housing. Who's responsible for building these homes? Are the federal Liberals becoming the private sector's competitors? How do these incentives allow for construction without the layers of red tape imposed by government at every level? How can housing become less expensive, as they have suggested? What impact will this have on the resale market? Where will they find the land for this? There are so many more questions, and so the announcement is here. This is the Liberal Party platform, and it says Mark Carney's Liberals unveiled Canada's most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War. And it's like a whole bunch of nonsense, again, because we don't know who's funding it or anything like that, right? And that's not great. Here's Mark Carney talking about this for 30 seconds. Again, this is campaigning as if everything's fine, nothing to see here. Nobody's questioning my judgment or competency and or allegiance to Canada for China, right? Like, it's all of those things, and this is pretending like none of that's happening. And sure is. You know that Leslie Nielsen clip, like nothing to see here and everything's going. I'll show it to you in a minute. Here we go.
We used to build things in this country. After the Second World War, Canada faced a housing crisis. The government built prefabricated homes that were easy to assemble and inexpensive. And those homes are still here 80 years later. Now we're in another housing crisis. And it's time your government got back into the business of building affordable homes. We will build new homes for Canadians at a pace not seen since the Second World War. We'll build a Canada you can afford.
Right. They've had 10 years and they've screwed it up royally every year, and every year it's gotten worse. This is the Leslie Nielsen clip. I went to see this movie in theaters. Naked Gun 2.5 or something like that. Naked Gun 33 1/3. Yeah. Right. I think it's The Naked Gun. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a different one. Leslie Nielsen was in a lot of movies. CPAC is reporting earlier, Liberal leader Mark Carney proposed a housing plan that would increase construction of housing to nearly 500,000 new homes a year, flipping the script on housing with a new approach to build faster, build smarter, and build more affordably. And like, they're just going to reclassify. Doug Ford reclassified a home in Ontario as a recovery bed or as a long-term bed, and so that created a lot of homes on paper, right? And it's a trick, right? Even though the argument is, once an elderly person moves there, they're not going to move to another home. Like, that's a home that they're going to kind of die in, and so on and so forth. And when it's vacated, that frees up housing. I don't know if it's a valid argument, but the funny thing about CPAC here is it seems like they're not questioning any of this. It's just nothing to see here. Sure, it's the same promise Trudeau made in 2015. Victoria says that's 9,612 houses per week. Absolutely not possible, right? Like, just not possible. It's not going to happen. And so pie in the sky lies and pretending everything's just fine is the Liberal Party's strategy. We'll see how it works out for them, Cotton, because I don't think it's going to be good. Mark Carney says, cheers to the Liberal team, ready to fight for you, Halton, except that they put out a tweet that said Milton. And he's like, where am I? Oh, not Milton, Halton, right? So delete that one. So the campaign disarray, not quite, with the China stuff, complete disarray, but their messaging is soft. Very, very soft. Here's another bit of questioning. It seems like maybe Brookfield will swoop in and buy and build and or own the modular home blocks, right? Like Soviet style, right? And that's not great. I don't want to have Canada in Soviet style housing, because that's not a win. Christia Freeland says, our Liberal housing plan will double the pace of construction to almost 500,000 new homes a year by cutting red tape, building more homes faster, and cutting taxes for first-time homebuyers. Learn more. And Sue says, Brookfield Asset Management under Carney's chairmanship pursued opportunistic real estate strategies that capitalized on market conditions, including high interest rates and housing demand. For example, in August 23, Brookfield CEO Bruce Flatt described leveraging stress in the market as a key opportunity, particularly in real estate, which the company saw as its sweet spot. This approach led to significant profits, which Brookfield Corporation, its parent company, reporting $3.4 billion from its real estate division in 24 alone. Acquisitions like the 77 Davisville Ave property in Toronto in September 24 highlight how Brookfield targeted rental markets in high-demand urban areas where rents often exceed local averages, such as 427 square foot studio apartments listed at $2,105 a month, well above Toronto's typical studio rent. So there you go. Buy there, and you've got a group of people who are captured and who have to pay higher rent, and you can leverage that for your profits and investors, right? So good job, Mark Carney. Yikes. And also, there's no incentive for Mark Carney to want to lower the price of these things, because his company makes a shit ton of money by owning these buildings and keeping people renting, right? The solution is rent more, right? And so we'll fix housing by renting you more. Crazy. Arthur says, Arthur Vandelay Says Libs now promise 500,000 homes per year, down from their 555,000 per year promise when these folks were running around with vests and hard hats on, promising 3.9 million homes in 7 years. Fun fact, most homes built in 1 year in Canada to date, 272,000. And there are very, very problematic bottlenecks for getting past that number. Okay? Work, labor. Like if you build 15 homes, you've got a drywall team. If you build 30 homes, you've got 2 drywall teams. And if you want to build more homes, you need more drywall teams. So you tap out at a certain level, right? There's a certain point where there just are no more drywall teams. If we work all of our drywall teams, they can do 300,000 houses. They could do 350,000 houses. They could do 400,000 houses. They sure as shit aren't doubling their output. And if they do double their output, it's not going to be quality work. It's going to be bad. Okay. And so it's not possible. Simply, there are bottlenecks that throwing money at is not going to fix, not in the short term. Even importing people, okay, we're going to import all of China's drywall teams. That's still not going to solve the problem. It's not. And it's not just drywall teams, it's every team, right? And so, the money, because building a house costs more than it used to, right? And so the money runs out way sooner than it did, and so on and so on and so on. There are bottlenecks that are not easily sorted out. And when I say the money runs out, like if I'm a developer and the government's saying, we want you to build houses, and it doesn't make economic sense for me to build the houses, then I'm not going to do it. And all sorts of other problems with regards to financing and the balance between how much a house has to cost versus how much the developer makes, like the person building the house, versus the taxes the municipality takes. And it's like you're talking $500,000, $600,000 just in. I mean, it's $250,000 for a house for taxes, right? So that goes up right onto the purchase price. The developer isn't paying that; the purchaser is. So it's absolutely crazy, and they're unrealistic. But the polls say that Mark Carney's going to win his riding. Latest polls give a 99% chance that Mark Carney wins Nepean. A man who hasn't lived in Canada for 11 years, never lived in the riding, knows nothing about the people, will do nothing for them. Local Conservative candidate, a veteran, businesswoman, community volunteer will fight 100% for her riding. What's going on? What do you think's going on? The elections are rigged. They're rigged. They're rigged. The CPC is putting out stuff. I think they're waiting to see how this China thing breaks, and then they may attack on it, may not. I don't know. How compromised are the CPC if they're not attacking? I didn't see much on it other than what we've seen already. And so are they putting together exposés on how compromised the Liberal Party is with China, so on and so forth? I don't know. There isn't much out from anybody else, so it's kind of interesting. I was busy yesterday, so maybe I missed it. But here's the Great Canadian Reset. They say, this is a brilliant campaign ad from Pierre Poilievre. Well done, team. I suggest candidates should also make some video ads. So yeah, I mean, it's relatively easy to do, really. Like the equipment that you need is relatively accessible. Most people have phones and microphones and things like that. So there's all sorts of ways to do this. And if you have a message that you think resonates, you can do this. Here's Pierre Poilievre.
What do you think, Prime Minister? Could you get the railway built today? Let's not forget why John A.
wanted an east-west railway. It's so that we wouldn't be so dependent on the Americans. But today, with the United States threatening tariffs, we need east-west trade more than ever before, and building that kind of project would be impossible. To start with, this Liberal minister would probably chain himself to a tree. Stephen Guilbeault, major Mark Carney supporter, got arrested climbing up the CN Tower and also climbing onto the roof of the Premier of Alberta's home, his private residence. He got arrested for those things, all to protest development. More recently, he said that the Liberal government will not support building any more roads. If you want to figure out how far back we've gone since John A.'s National Railway, consider this. To transport Alberta oil to Quebec, it needs to go through the United States, pipelines south of the border. That gives the Americans the power to cut off Canadians from our own energy supply.
It must hurt you to hear that, doesn't it?
We'll leave it there. It's another almost 2 minutes. So it's a long campaign ad, but do you think that resonates? It's interesting. I don't know. There are very wonky political people who will like that. I don't know that it translates to a general audience because it's a little up the nose. Wonky is you're talking about like political policy or all the stuff surrounding political policy, and it gets a little dry, right? I mean, I like that stuff. We've got pipelines that goes through the United States. We could fix that problem. I like that kind of stuff, right? But not everybody. 30-year-olds, from my experience, not that interested. When I was 30, I was interested in it, but I don't think I articulated it well, and I was brainwashed as everybody else was at the time that I knew. Anyway, regardless, most people are disincentivized from getting into an ad like that. So it's an interesting strategy. Maybe it'll work. Hopefully. Here's Maxime Bernier. FNL says they want to revive Canada's armed forces and a call for strength. And Maxime Bernier says we'll bring back the armed forces to what it should be. So here we go.
We will bring back the Canadian armed forces to what it should be, a strong army of a strong Canadian men and women willing to fight and defend our country. We need not only to increase the defense budget and make sure we get proper equipment for our armed forces, but even more importantly, we need an army of non-woke soldiers loyal to our country, loyal to Canada. A People's Party government will eliminate all DI programs, gender nonsense, and woke rules applying to the military. We will fire every non-citizen, and we will restate those who were fired over the vaccine mandates. We will bring back the Canadian armed forces to what it should be, a strong army of a strong Canadian men and women willing to fight and defend our country.
Personally, I think that that kind of sentiment plays better to your ABC voter. It's more base and direct, whereas the building east-west. I mean, I love the idea of building pipelines. I just think most people are not in a headspace to discuss it appropriately. Jagmeet Singh wants to steal money from the oil and gas evil guys, according to him, CEOs, and give it to poor people. For real. This is how he thinks he's going to win prime ministership.
Your hard-earned public money is being given to highly profitable oil and gas companies. They're receiving massive subsidies every year. That has to end. New Democrats would once and for all end those subsidies. They must end. And we would use that money instead of giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies. Instead, we would give supports to everyday families. So our plan would help 3.3 million homes get retrofitted.
How many jobs would they lose after you steal the money from the oil companies? Moron. Here is Yves Francois Blanchet saying, we will never approve an east-west pipeline. Never. Blanchet, Quebec leader, calls Energy East pipeline a fantasy that will never get built. It's just something Poilievre and Carney are promoting to get voters in Western Canada. Blanchet says the pipeline would provide nothing for the people of the Quebec for the Quebec economy. So here's a little bit of Blanchet talking about this, although it's a little long, and so we won't listen to the whole thing.
There's nothing for us in it. There's nothing for the planet in it. There's no project. There's no promoter. There's nothing on the table. The only thing that there is on the table is the intention of the two main leaders, Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre, to get some votes in Western Canada. This pipeline would cost several times tens of billions of dollars, a large part of which would come from public money through any kind of scheme. And it would provide nothing for Quebec economy. We would pay, last year Canada paid $30 billion to the oil and gas industry. $7 billion.
The oil and gas industry provides power, reliable power that works. $7 billion. It's the bill, man. Like you pay your electricity bill. It's ridiculous that people get upset about these things. It's crazy. And the government subsidizes these things, so it's cheaper for the end user. Ontario pays energy bill that Doug Ford pays through our taxes, and then we pay our regular energy bill. Because if we had to pay the whole energy bill, we'd lose our minds and say, what? Who mismanaged this? And then we'd find out that it was Kathleen Wynne. So yeah, for real, it's terrible, awful. We are being managed. And I mean, the idea that a pipeline would do nothing for Quebec is just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I digress. We have to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll catch you tomorrow. And we'll carry on for everybody else. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful